You're listening to Faithless Brewing, a Magic the Gathering podcast for decks by rogues. Each week, we design new decks for tournament play, and then we put our creations to the test, so we can share our findings on the air, what worked, what didn't, and what can be improved for the following weeks. On today's episode, Mor and David join forces in order to look for the last cards of Dominaria United. Almost all the spoilers have been released, but a few left for the next Monday. Can our heroes find the best brews with these cards? Are there something they would be excited about? Or is it doomed to be a forgotten set? Shouldn't you know more about Dominaria tonight?
Welcome to the Faithless Brewing podcast. I am David Robertson, and I am joined by my man south of the border. He is Emmy. He is Mordekaiser on Twitter.com and on the Twitch platform. What is up, my friend?
Hey, David. Doing great. Love to be with you tonight. We were forsaken by our God-beloved CEO.
Yeah, the Lodestar is not with us. He is in the middle of packing. His house is full of boxes and stress.
It's weird to talk to Dan Stress because he's always like the most just chill man down to earth. I haven't ever even heard Dan screaming, I think. Just having him all stressed out that he was like, Mord, David, take the reins and lead us to the promised land. And here we are, heading for Dominaria United.
So we do not yet have the entire spoiler. I believe the final X amount of cards comes out tomorrow, but I believe this is like the classic late drop where there's all just uncommons and commons. Now, typically, there's one uncommon that WotC doesn't realize is broken. You know, this is where, like, Delver was spoiled and the Deathrite Shaman. There's a few, like, famous cards that were just, like, at the end of the spoiler, they obviously didn't realize how good they were.
Wait, Deathrite Shaman was considered, like, bulk? Was, like, on the bulk set and part of the set?
Yeah, I remember it vividly. I was like, oh, that's kind of an interesting card. And then, like, as soon as you play it, you're like, Jesus Christ, this card is insane.
This is not interesting. This is busted.
Yeah. So we'll stipulate that there may yet be, you know, a card or two left that kind of raises some eyebrows. But we have, I believe, most of the rares and mythic rares and most of the uncommons have been printed. So I think Emmy and Dan have done a, yeoman's job to do the first two parts of the set review. We are going to basically finish it today. The next time you hear from us, we are going to be back with sort of our rough top 10 or maybe a few stray cards that we don't get to today. We'll start to brew next week, but today it's all about first impressions on the last third of the spoilers.
Exactly. By Monday, you will hear us getting those straight last cards, as David said, and our first ideas for brews, or how many cards will actually impact the formats and get our beautiful top 10s for Pioneer and Modern.
Absolutely. So let's start, as we like to do, at the cheapest point. We have a card that is very similar to Mana Confluence.
Actually, before that, just a little tiny bit of housekeeping as we...
Oh, yeah, sorry.
Yeah, I am the one to forget usually, but I had to add a name just a second ago, so I had it open. So, first of all, thanks so much to our amazing 3 new patrons, Benjamin W, Great Beard, and Luis. I don't know if it's Louis or Luis, but thanks so much to the 3 of you. Every single back helps us a lot and helps us keep going, keeps the podcast going, and us, our beautiful group of co-hosts, just spewing random crap into a microphone for 2 hours every episode.
Now, do you think Benjamin W and Luis also have great beards? But just like Great Beard's beard is so good, they have to go by Great Beard.
Maybe Great Beard is not actually a patron, it's actually Benjamin W at the start, then we got the subtitle, now the Great Beards, and then we have Louis.
I see.
Like, it's a categorization for Louis. Louis is a Great Beard.
Or do you think that this patron is Great Beard? Like, they were really good in the 90s, when there was, unfortunately, a lot more homophobia at being the fake male partner, of, like, lesbian people. Like, all these guys who were very sympathetic to Ellen, right? They went to, like, red carpet events with her. They were her beard. I don't know if you have that term, but that's an English term for
I have never heard that term, but it fits so perfect. You know when you never heard that term, but it's like, yeah, it lines up perfectly with what you're saying.
Yeah, so a couple of these actors that were very sympathetic to Ellen, they were happy, they were very honored to be her beard, at a time when you had to be, unfortunately, the closet was a kind of a shameful time in American history. So maybe that's what they were. Maybe they were just an excellent supporter of their lesbian sisters. Whoever you are, we appreciate it very much. Thank you.
Thank you so much. So why did these beautiful people join our Patreon? Well, first and foremost, they are supporting the show, they are helping us keep going. Second, they get access to the beautiful Discord we have, where everything is chaos and everyone is brewing, so people are either brewing, suggesting, or just complaining about bad ideas they had and how they worked out. Finally, other fun perks such as merch, and the possibility for higher Patreons to nominate cards for our monthly project, and for every Patreon to vote in them, so you can help us decide what to play for a specific month. This month in specific, we are working on Resurgent Belief.
Alright, yeah. So, let's start at the beginning. And by the beginning, I mean the cheapest mana cost. We have a new mana confluence, sort of. So, Thran Portal. Thran Portal enters the battlefield tapped unless you control 2 or fewer other lands, so it's like the fast lands. As it enters the battlefield, choose a basic land type. It is that type in addition to its other types. And then mana abilities of Thran Portal cost an additional 1 life to activate. So it's similar to Mana Confluence in that it is very good fixing very early in the game at the cost of life. It's worse than Mana Confluence later in the game, but it also does provide a land type, which I think the thought is for domain decks to be a thing in Standard, probably, they kind of seeded this card.
Yeah, this is like fixing for the future domain decks that they're expecting. I'm not sure the gate part is relevant at all in the actual format, or in any of the formats like Pioneer, Standard, or Modern, but I think it's mostly a stuff, an extra pump for Commander. Like, making it a gate makes it at least interesting for a lot of Commander decks, even if it flops in Standard or such.
Yeah, and every once in a blue moon, there will be a 5-0 with the Gates deck. I mean, and there's no, like, brewing happening. I mean, the 4-ofs are all just the Gates matter cards, and does it sort of line up with the decks that you play, but it is a deck, right? I think it's 5-0 in a couple weeks.
I haven't seen any 5-0s, but I'm gonna trust you and say it seems possible. Like, the cards don't seem terrible.
It has 5-0 for sure.
Yeah, it just seems clunky. Not bad, just, if you're playing all gates, but getting this many untapped gates might help in the end.
Yeah, so I think for Pioneer, this is just worse than Mana Confluence. I don't think there's really going to be a domain deck per se. And I think Modern has the default domain deck, which is cracking your fetch land on turn 1 and putting a tap Triome into play. So I don't know that either format really can do enough with this for the times when it's worse than Mana Confluence, which is already a land you don't want too many of in your opening hand.
Also, the fact how this is written makes it so even if you have something like Yami Yaba or Urborg in Modern, you are still gonna, or actually Urborg in Pioneer, you're gonna have to still pay the 1 life.
Oh yeah, I didn't even think of that.
Because there's no other way to write it, because let's say you want this setup for green, so if you make this a forest, it's like you're already giving it a Yami Yaba effect, so it's always gonna have the capability of gate, forest, tap for a green. So that's the only way to actually make it work as they wanted to. So there's no way of skipping that pay 1 life method. Any mana ability is gonna cost you 1, not just the one provided by itself.
Yeah, I'm interested to see if this actually shows up in Standard. They obviously made it tap for a land type to see if they can make the domain thing.
Yes.
I'm not sure that the payoffs are actually there that I've seen, but I don't claim to be an expert on Standard, so we'll have to
Yeah,
see.
me neither. But that's exactly what it's aiming for.
All right, next card. Combat Research.
Previewed in Spanish, which always makes me happy because I can check if it was properly translated, where they fail a lot of the time.
All right, did it pass the test?
It did pass the test. This one passed the test. Also, word in Spanish, it's called rebatir, and it makes absolutely no sense and it sucks. But besides that, 1 blue mana, Combat Research, Enchantment Aura. Enchant creature. Enchanted creature has, whenever this creature deals combat damage to a player, draw a card, which is a pretty common effect nowadays, and as long as it's legendary, it gets +1/+1, and more importantly, word 1.
Yeah, so if you're enchanting a legendary creature, this is better than Curious Obsession. It does not have a drawback, and it has an extra bonus.
But you're forced to make it a legendary creature to not make it a lot worse than Curious Obsession. You lose the drawback, but the +1/+1 is more than worth it over the drawback.
Yeah, and I think the one deck plays Curious Obsession in all of Pioneer, right? And it's a bunch of mono blue flyers, and none of them are legendary. So this is not a card that you'd play unless you wanted a 5th maybe version of that effect in the existing deck. And right now, I don't think we have enough legends to be able to go like all in on legends, because they all have to be cheap as well for this card to be super useful.
I mean, the only dream is if you go turn 1 Ragavan and double this on turn 2, it's never gonna die. Like, that's the dream scenario. Like, turn 1 Ragavan, turn 2 double combat research. Now I have a 4-3 with Ward 2. That's throwing me double card and double and treasures. Like, that's a dream.
Yeah, it's a beautiful dream. At the same time, like, the thing about Ragavan is you don't need to enchant it for it to almost have this on top.
Look, just because you're right doesn't make the dream less beautiful.
True. So yeah, super cool card. I could see it eventually. You know, they really are adding legendary almost as like trinket text to a lot of cards. They're printing many more cheap legends. There certainly is a possibility where we'd have enough cheap legends. There's one interesting cheap legend that does have flying that this card is very interesting on. But other than that, I don't think this is going to create a new deck. I don't think there's going to be an all legends deck in Pioneer, although I could be wrong.
I do remember someone comparing legendary to what was cannot be regenerated in old cards. Like, just staple this into everything and hope it's more than trinket text eventually.
Bury, we used to call it.
Yeah, you boomers
when I was a young man.
bury all the creatures. And I was like, what the hell is bury? and at first I was just thought this means destroy. And it was like years later I eventually learned, no, this is destroy without regenerate. Like, this has actual text.
All right, real quick before we leave the 1-drops here, Dan said skip, but he's not here, so I'm overruling him. I want to highlight Tail Swipe. I think this card is actually going to be quite good. It's 1 green instant. Choose target creature you control and target creature you don't control. If you cast a spell during your main phase, the creature you control gets +1/+1 until end of turn, then those creatures fight each other.
I actually agree with you. I think this card is pretty decent. Instant speed fight doesn't tend to cost 1.
Right. And then it has the upside, so he says he'd prefer Primal Might. Well, this is a 2-mana Primal Might during your main phase for 1 mana, so you save a land. Yeah. Of course, you lose the modality, but the instant ability is really interesting to me.
I think it makes it a lot better. Like, against mid-range decks, the fight spells always get really weak against removal, and being able to do it in response to a removal spell rather than the other way around is pretty huge.
Yeah, absolutely. So, yeah, there isn't a lot of mono-green beatdown decks left. I think everyone's kind of settled on the like mono-green planeswalkers with, you know, sometimes random 5-color planeswalkers because of Oath of Nissa. Again, I think people just lock into these lists. I don't know that list is necessarily the best. I'd like to see some more innovation. This is the kind of card that I think does pay you off for maybe being, you know, playing Nightpack Ambusher, playing, you know, some of the more like blue-green reactive spells. So, yeah, effects this cheap are interesting and at least worth noting, is I guess what I would say.
I think the biggest problem with this card is not the card itself, is the lack of a home.
Yeah.
Going from there, the only other one-drop of almost interest is just Runic Shot, because it's a 1 white mana destroy target tapped creature with kicker for 1 blue that allows it to scry 2. And I'm only mentioning because of Roots of Drakes. Just because I want to make Dan happy. Besides that, 1 mana remove target tapped creature might be the cheapest we have ever gotten this effect, but Sorcery Speed is sort of devastating.
Yeah, that's tough.
So yeah, we can just skip the 1-drops and go to the 2-drops. To what might be the coolest bird wizard we have seen in a while. And Magic players have a fantasy for bird wizards for some reason. Like, people always love them.
Yeah, I'm not sure why that is.
But they just get excited about them. But this one in particular is Seasoned Pyromancer at home. So we have Battlewing Mystic. 1 and a blue for a 2/1 flying. When it enters the battlefield, if it was kicked and the kicker cost is only 1 red, discard your hand, then draw 2 cards. So you have a 3 mana 2/1 flying that allows you to discard your hand and draw 2 if you want to do so.
Yeah, what do you think of this? The discard effect and draw 2 cards has been printed before as a 2 mana instant spell, I think 1 red instant. And it saw no play even though people thought it might be worth something. This is kind of interesting as like the top level curve of, again, like a tempo deck.
Or a wizard, like an Iset wizard.
Yeah.
Like, this is amazing. It's something where you try to curve, like, turn 1 wizard, turn 2 play the wizard lightning, and this as a way to refill your hand.
Yeah, exactly.
Or, you know, just Iset Drakewhack. Iset Drakewhack. Just because 1 mana kicker. Dan is having the time of his life with the 1 mana kickers.
Yeah, I mean, he's got so many color options, he's going to have to try all the various combinations. I think the problem for this card on just straight rate in Pioneer is that drawing 2 or 3 is so easy to do with other cards. You don't have to play Welkin turns to do so.
So I think the way to actually make this card work is that you're actually getting advantage of either the flying body or the wizard text.
Yeah, that makes sense to me.
If not, you're just playing better stuff to draw your cards. So I don't hate it, I think it just needs to find specific homes.
Yeah, we'll have to see. I mean, I think cards like this, you could imagine them finding a home, and then they just never do.
But I hope it does, because it just reminds me of the Warcraft 3 dwarf riding hypogryphs that throw hammers. Because it's exactly that in the art, it's just lacking the dwarf.
Right. All right, our next 2-drop is the classic legend for 2 mana. This is Elas il-Kor Sadistic Pilgrim. So white-black for a 2/2 death touch. Whenever another creature enters the battlefield under your control, you gain a life. Whenever another creature you control dies, each opponent loses 1 life. So this is basically, a better version. Well, first of all, it's like, I think the best Soul Sister in Pioneer. Unfortunately, it's a legend.
Don't we have the 1 mana Soul Sister?
Not in Pioneer.
Not real Soul Sister, the 1-drop that it also returns from the graveyard.
Yeah. But this is a 2/2 death touch that also gives you stuff when creature dies.
Okay,
so I think it's not the cheapest version of that effect, if that's what you're saying.
Sorry, I thought you meant it was like the best on rate. No, you mean like the best value-wise, like in the whole setup. Okay, as a card.
Right.
Okay, yeah, I agree.
Because we've seen that, the random life gain can matter. The Pioneer format is very aggressive right now. The doming your opponents when creatures die. If you've got a free sack effect, they aren't very populous. I don't know that this does anything in Modern. These effects exist on 2 mana creatures all over the place. And 1 mana creatures in some cases.
I don't see this in any sort of Modern play, sadly.
It is a cleric. They have, sacrifice themes, so there's probably, some minor synergies there. I'm guessing this probably isn't quite good enough in Pioneer.
There's also another card where I think we are talking about later, which is like the Shadow Lord, the Cleric Lord.
Yes.
So maybe if we actually want to meme, we can make a cleric deck now. I think we have enough decent clerics that people always forget about but exist. And Dungeons and Dragons had a lot of cleric matter cards that everybody forgot about.
Yeah, that's a good point.
So maybe there's a cleric deck that no one has found yet, but the pieces are there. I'm not saying it's cool, I'm saying it might be fun.
Okay, well, let's talk about that cleric card right now, since we're on the topic.
Seems excellent.
All right, Shadow-Rite Priest. So this is another 2 mana cleric. 1 in a black, human cleric, 2/2. Other clerics you control get +1/+1. So there's a cycle of 2 mana lords. This is the black one. 3 black, tap it, sacrifice another cleric, search your library for a black creature card, put it into the battlefield, then shuffle. That is a crazy powerful ability.
Effect is insane. The biggest problem is playing more clerics than this one. So if we fix that by playing a cleric deck, we have a lord that if it lives in the long game just wins you the game.
Yeah, and I mean, just a 2 mana 2/2 that buffs everything isn't terrible, right? We know on rate that isn't quite good enough, but it does something. And so the fact that it also, in addition to sort of being like a mediocre beatdown card, it also has this, text where the deck building costs are very limited, right? You can probably put 2 crazy black creatures in your deck that this can find at any time.
Okay.
I mean, they don't have to be clerics.
No, it just gets you literally any black creature you want to look for. If only we had decent clerics in Modern, we could go find something like Reselrun, of course. What can you get in Pioneer? Like, if you had to say, this is the black creature I'm gonna get.
I don't know. You have the 5/5 flying creature that when it comes into play, exiles a permanent of your choice, and when it dies, it exiles a permanent of your choice. But that doesn't seem quite worth it. Because ideally, you'd want to also get something that's quite a bit more expensive than 5 mana.
Wait, is this why Sheoldred sucks?
Oh, there you go. Maybe that's the...
Is this card to blame for Sheoldred sucking? I'm gonna get so much hate in the Discord again, because I get hate every time I rant on Sheoldred. This is why Sheoldred sucks. This is why Sheoldred is not an 8-drop.
It is weird, though. We don't have that many, super game-ending demons or something that you can go fetch, so...
I mean, it makes sense. They try to really make sure there's not, any reanimation or, show and tell combo in Pioneer with that sort of effect.
Yeah. But still, a 2 mana that survives, and you put 5 mana in and sacrifice another permanent, it seems like you should be able to get a card that functionally wins the game.
Yeah.
But, I mean, maybe in Modern, I guess Ethervial lets you, flash it in and gives you the opportunity to... No? Anything? Anybody?
No. I think
okay.
what I love is the fact that you can activate an instant speed. You don't have to activate it as a sorcerer. I think that's huge.
Yeah.
Because you're not playing into board wipes, you're just, like, imagine you just spend your whole turn 5 doing this and they just go, okay, farewell. Adios.
Right.
But, interesting card, and might be the linchpin I need to force myself to make a cleric deck and just cry a little bit after I choose 3-5 leaves in a row.
I mean, also the clerics and triggering on dying and stuff is also good with the 2-mana artifact, and you tap it to and you sacrifice a creature of a certain type and get a creature of the same type for 1 mana more. Yeah.
Are you talking into making a Pyre of Heroes cleric deck? Is that what you're doing right now?
Yeah, I'm talking you into making a Pyre.
This is your fault.
There's some pretty decent ones, I think.
Are there?
See, I think the problem was there weren't any good 2-mana clerics before, so now.
We have the 2-mana Soul Sister that grows, which is a black and a white for a 2-mana 2/2. Whenever a cleric enters the battlefield, you gain 1 life. And whenever you gain life for the first time, it gets a counter. That's a cleric. Then we have the 1-mana 1/1, and if it's the second spell, it puts a counter. Banisher Priest is a cleric.
Okay. Tutorable removal.
I hate you because of this. Now you made me look for clerics, and this is your fault. Now I'm gonna spend my whole Monday looking for clerics for Monday deck lists.
Alright, we are gonna move off of clerics then, and we're gonna move to a card that's even harder to build around.
Oh yes.
Which is the new Weatherlight.
Weatherlight Compleated. 2-mana legendary artifact vehicle with flying. As long as it has 4 or more fire resist counters on it, it's a creature in addition to its other types, which means it's a vehicle without a crew ability, but rather it crews itself when it gets enough counters. And how do you get those fire resist counters? Well, whenever a creature dies, you put a counter on it, then draw a card if it has 7 or more fire resist counters, and if not, you scry 1. So to sum this up a little bit, the first 4 times a creature dies with this on the board, you scry 1 and it becomes a creature, and the 3 next times while this is a creature, you also scry, and after that you start drawing a card whenever a creature dies.
Okay, so just to clarify, when a creature you control dies.
Okay, sure, yeah.
Which is, well, that's a huge, hugely worse ability.
Of course. So this is really for a sack deck, like automatically for a sack deck, where I think rather than trying to make this a 5/5, you're making use of the fact you're getting free scries and draws consistently.
Yeah, so, I mean, are we thinking like the red-black sacrifice deck in Pioneer, where we're, sacking, the cat oven thing is happening, the anvil can be sacking, and the 1-man artifact creature it makes each turn? Those decks at least have enough creatures being sacrificed, you could imagine this eventually becoming a creature.
Yeah, with the anvil plus the cat, you could get in there, because even if it's a creature you control, at least it allows you to sacrifice tokens.
Right.
My only problem with this is, this was so close. I think if it was, instead of scrying, it surveilled one, this would have been so much better.
Oh, interesting.
Like that teeny itty bitty bit of difference, it's huge, because then the first 7 times, at least you're trying to fill up your graveyard for your sacrifice decks.
Yeah, I unfortunately think this literally probably doesn't have that because Surveil is not evergreen, so they'd have to write all that text in.
Yeah, I think that's the only reason, and it's a bit sad, but it makes sense, and I don't think this will see play. Like, if it started drawing cards whenever it became a creature, I think it would be a lot better. But the fact you need to scry 7 times before you draw your first, and 3 of those it's exposed as a 5/5. A 5/5 is pretty big, but the fact it can die to any removal spell like a Fatal Push makes it so you're not getting to draw, like, in any % of the games.
Yeah, I actually think this card is totally unplayable. I mean, I could
agree.
maybe see, like, red-black, or maybe in, like, Modern. Like, I think Aspiring Spike has a few sacrifice-based decks. Sure, you can play it as a one-of, but I just think you're going to end up realizing this is a ton of work for not that much reward at the end. Like, a 5/5 flying isn't even that good if it only gets to attack on turn, like, 6 or 7. I mean, an Air Elemental could have done more damage by itself. Like, it's preposterous.
Yeah, I can see it, sadly. Maybe someone will get some results with it, but I don't think it will be because of the card, but rather because the deck was good. Like, this isn't a terrible card, and it has some good scenarios, it just seems sort of win more. If you're already being able to sacrifice 7 creatures, why are you not winning?
Right, yeah, exactly.
But then we go to a card I absolutely love. I don't know if it's good, but I love it.
I don't know if, well, it's certainly super powerful. I just don't know if it has a home. So this is Ivy Gleeful Spellthief. Ivy Gleeful Spellthief, green, blue, 2/1 flying fairy rogue. Whenever a player casts a spell that targets only a single creature other than Ivy, you may copy that spell. That copy targets Ivy. And a copy of an aura spell becomes a token. So Dan has some notes here, and I think he made some common misreadings that a lot of people had. So let's just clarify a few things. It is a May ability, so people are used to these cards. You know, we've had Precursor Golem, we've had Zadra, we've had a Nephilim, if you're as old as I am, where you target the creature itself, you target Ivy, and then that effect gets copied for all creatures you control or other creatures you control or something. And your opponent can always disrupt it by targeting the card you target, right? So your instant fails. This goes the other way. You get to target another creature. So you get the copy no matter what. And if they have one removal spell, they only get to pick which creature they kill. And then 2, it's a May. So if they cast a positive effect on their creature, you get to copy it. If you choose not to copy their removal spell or whatever, you won't copy it. And then, yeah, this is only 2 mana. 2 mana, 2/1 flying. So it already starts to do this very early in the game. And then, unlike all those other effects, which only copied instants and sorceries, this copies auras,
That's the fun part.
Including mutate creatures.
You can make Ivy a token, and that's really fun.
So if we talked about the combat research, if that card is going to see any play, I could imagine it seeing play in a deck with Ivy, where you put it on another creature, the copy goes on Ivy, and Ivy is a legend. So she becomes a 3/2 ward 1 that's drawing a card every time she hits your opponent, and then if they, tap out to kill Ivy in response to that, you've got a curiosity effect on maybe a non-legendary creature, but you kind of got like a 2-for-1 out of it. So, but that's really just the tip of the iceberg. I don't know, again, if there's a home. I don't know if you need to build like a green-blue, Boggle style deck around this. I do think this beats Red-White Heroic by itself, if that deck still exists in Pioneer. I think Liliana the Veil actually is going to be awesome against that deck. So unfortunately, I think Liliana the Veil is going to chase out the best, the food that Ivy, she just give you free wins there, but maybe she's just good enough on rate if you build like a green-blue flash deck or something like that.
I just want to make a bad mutate deck. I really want to make a bad mutate deck. I just don't know if we have enough cheap mutates. Like, I just think of something like turn a 1-drop into Ivy, into like the 2-mana mutate creature, the one that allows you to make a Coiling Oracle for like you tap your creature.
The 2/4.
Yeah, and you make Ivy a 2/4 flyer that just starts tapping and making value. And the good part, if they remove Ivy in response, you still get a 2/4.
Right.
So like you're always getting value if you get to custom mutate.
Yeah.
I think that's the best part. So Ivy, really interesting card. The first time this effect has been both a May and not only instant and sorceries, it makes this at least interesting.
Yeah, absolutely. This is a card that, if you're going to build, you should start with the idea that you're going to build around it. And then if you're not going to build around it, when maybe that deck doesn't exist, you should at least look if you can slot it in a reasonable deck that could just play her on just pure rate. All right, next up, Baird, Argivian Recruiter.
A lot of 2-mana multicolor legendaries.
Yes. Tell me about Baird.
I think this one might be the most boring of them all so far. 2-mana 2/2 human soldier for a rare and a white. So Boros, at the beginning of your end step, if you control a creature with power greater than its base power, create a 1/1 white soldier creature token. Is this good? So assuming you have any sort of counters on your creatures, this is immediately a 2/2 that makes a 1/1 on the end step. It is so... I can picture the dream of like, turn 1 champion of the parish into turn 2 these.
Yeah, I mean, that seems pretty sweet. Also, the Soldier Lord obviously modifies creature's power, so if you play this when the Soldier Lord is in play, it makes another soldier that the Soldier Lord is buffing. Aspirant is a card that naturally is adding power to creatures in play. Even if they kill the Aspirant, it's probably like leaving a +1/+1 counter on your 1-drop, so every time Baird comes into play. We've seen a bunch of like red-white mid-range lists that are playing Aspirant and Wandering Emperor. Those are both cards that leave like +1/+1 counters behind. So yeah, it's just a really interesting card. It does not ask a lot of you. A 2-mana 2/2 isn't great. A 2-mana 2/2 that makes a 1/1 is pretty good. And if it makes 2 1/1s, that's actually like really good. So it's a card your opponent immediately has to kill, right? If it gives you a 1/1, your opponent has to spend their next turn removing it. That's already above the curve for a 2-drop, I think.
It's above curve, but the fact you only get it on your end step for me is, I think, really weak. Like, basically, like, assuming this survives 2 rotations, you get 2 tokens out of this, and that's assuming a lot. Like, this makes it to the end step of turn 3.
Yeah, and you had a modified 1-drop on turn 1. You know, I'm imagining this is probably coming down on turn 3 if it's going to give you a token the first time. So, yeah, it might not get there. It might just be worth it as like a one-of in humans because they have so many, you know, Lord effects and Thali's Lieutenants, etc. Plus the Enlist 1-drop. It might just be that it's just worth it as a 1-drop, or excuse me, as a one-of. Just to fill out their 2-drop slot, or maybe it just doesn't get there. Also, kind of an interesting card in like the like white X Bogles decks that exist in Pioneer, where they kind of want bodies. So if this comes into play and you've already modified your SRAM or something, just like having a bunch of 1/1s left around to pick up enchantments, that might be something. So it's worth thinking about.
Flare Husk is a fun way as well.
Yeah, although now you're playing Flare Husk.
Yeah, I think this falls in a similar place to the Battlewing Mystic in that the card is good as long as you can use its creature types. Because I think you have better 2-drops, but I don't know if you have better 2-drops that are humans. Also, it's a soldier, and we had a really terrible soldier lord we are not going to talk about. But maybe if we look really deep, we find a soldier tribal that doesn't suck. Talia is a soldier, right?
Yeah,
That's
and it makes soldiers.
Before we skip the card, I just remember that almost all token producers in this expansion, like the 2-mana 1/1 Raise the Alarm, make soldiers. So maybe in Standard we actually have a soldier tribal?
Yeah, that'd be interesting. A throwback. I don't like that humans was ever like made a meaningful tribe, so I'm glad that there's not a human payoff here and that it's actually buffing soldiers. Just a generic human is the most boring thing in the world.
Yeah, and they just keep spamming them.
Yeah, and of course, there's humans on almost every plane, so they always get random cards that have nothing to do with human trial. They just happen to be powerful humans, so...
All of a sudden, it pops up.
Yeah. All right, on to our next card. So this is a card that's sort of Shrievery, I'm going to say. He likes these grindy mid-range cards. This is Phyrexian Missionary, so it's 1 and a white for a 2/3 lifelink Phyrexian Human Cleric. So Cleric is worthwhile, we mentioned that. Human is worthwhile. Kicker, 1 and a black. If it enters the battlefield and it was kicked, return target creature card from your graveyard to your hand. So, 2-mana 2/3 lifelinks are not actually that common in the history of Magic, and 2-mana 2/3 lifelinks with only 1 colored pip are even rarer. And then you have this additional ability where it like is a built-in 2-for-1. So, in my opinion, if Roost of Drakes is going to be a deck in Pioneer, I actually think it has to be a super grindy like value deck, probably in Esper colors. And this card actually seems very interesting to me there as a way to stay alive, a way to accrue value, to buy back a creature with kicker from your graveyard, to re-kick, with your Roost of Drakes in play. So I don't know if that deck will exist. I'm guessing it will be a little too weak, but I think this is the kind of card that deck needs.
Stepping a 2/2 to every single kicker card, when you start looking at the 1-mana removal that scries 2, when you start looking at this Gravedigger that also works as a creature when you need it, like, I guess that, like, the mono white humans, a 2/3 lifelinker for 2, it's actually a really big stonewall.
Right, exactly.
So that versatility is actually pretty interesting.
All right, still in the 2s, we are moving on to another Bird Wizard. Mord, tell me about Balmor.
So this is Adelis, but new. Adelis post fires. Balmor Battle Mage Captain, a blue and a red for a 1/3 flying Bird Wizard. Whenever you cast an instant or sorcery, creatures you control get +1/+0 and trample until the end of turn. So, where Adelis needed wizards, this needs anything. And it isn't X2, it's a 1/3, which is a lot better. And also only costs 2, why does it have so many upsides?
Yeah, I think this card is really good. Blue-Red Pioneer Prowess was actually pretty close. At various points, it's actually had pretty good results. Granting trample to your 1-mana 1/1 prowess creatures and doubling the power that they get from every instant or sorcery is amazing. It also is really good if you're doing like a Jeskai token thing with the 1/3 that they spoiled earlier, where you can tap 2 creatures whenever you cast an instant. So that deck wants a bunch of like instant and sorcery token makers. And if you have a bunch of creatures, you don't actually have to cast that many spells if you're giving +1/+0 to like 4 creatures. It's really good with Young Pyromancer, which again also works with a bunch of instants and sorceries. And it's a wizard for Wizard's Lightning, which is relevant only specifically in Pioneer, but this, along with Soulscar Mage, is maybe just giving you enough wizard density right there. So
Plus the wizard we talked about a few seconds ago might be like 9 and 10th copies you need for consistency.
yeah, so right there, we're talking about a deck that still gets to play, right? Treasure Cruise. You could certainly imagine the deck playing Treasure Cruise. And you're not having to like suffer any card quality. And then you have some of these combo kills, right? Where you cast 3 or 4 spells, and all of a sudden you're attacking with like this thing is 3 or 4 power flying trample. Your Soulscar Mage is like 8 or 9 power trample, or whatever. Maybe you got a Young Pyromancer with 3 or 4 tokens, and they're all 3 or 4 power. So yeah, I think this card's really good.
Yeah, I agree. Being a 2-drop instead of a 3-drop, I think is just huge. Like, it's a bonkers difference. Because if you go turn 1, any 1-drop into turn 2 these, turn 3, if you play 3 1-mana spells, you're giving your whole board, you're hitting for +9. And,
Right.
like, just assuming you play 3 balls, that's 20 damage exactly. And if you're playing 3 shocks, that's 17 damage. And you only play 2 creatures and 3 spells.
Yeah. So yeah, anything like that where you are actually like accruing a ton of value, you can win games where you're not casting a lot of spells. That always makes me very interested.
Yeah. So I actually quite like this. I'm happy for this one. Not requiring Wizard. And it's also giving it trample, not allowing people to champ block, especially this one that's
Yes.
a flyer and most of the creatures blocking it will be 1/1s. It's not insignificant.
Yeah. All right. So that's a winner for sure for me. I think that's going to encourage people to build. There's going to be 4 or 5 different variants of the blue-red X deck, and that will be one of them that will still be very good. It's not a budget version or anything. It's a different version that's also very strong. All right, on to another good 2-drop. We are talking about Leaf Crown Visionary. This is the Elf Lord, so green for a 1/1 Elf Druid. Other elves you control get +1/+1. Whenever you cast an elf spell, you may pay green if you do draw a card. So this card
insane.
this seems insane to me. Dan is not that excited about it. I'm really surprised, especially in Modern. You have these effects where you can, tap your elves to make mana. You have the elf that untaps every time you cast a green spell. This almost gives you like this built-in draw effect. Plus, it's a lord, so all the elves that you're casting at the end of all this are getting bigger.
Like, I remember when Realm Walker was like first released, people were playing it and actually drawing a lot of cards. Just imagine, instead of being a 3-drop, it's a 2-drop, and it's pumping your team. I think this is an amazing card. Like, this can really go off. And the fact if you play this on like turn 3 or 4, you actually get priority first, and this is when you cast, you actually get to draw a card. Like, you still get you get a 2-for-1 immediately if you have enough mana, which is really common for elves. It's insane.
Yeah, I don't know if this is actually, if there's going to be an elf deck in Pioneer, because they don't actually have that much way to make mana. They don't have any of the crazy like elf generators. They don't get to play the 3-mana Elf Lord.
The best one. The
Priest of Titania. Yeah. But maybe. I mean, it just casting Llanowar Elf, tapping another green and getting to draw, so turning like Llanowar Elf into Elvish Visionary, but in the future gets to tap for mana is just, you're just flying through your deck.
Yeah, I think, especially in those games where you're like slowly developing resources, you're just playing through the mana just to not overexpose to a board wipe. And if you play a Visionary, your opponent is gonna force to remove it even if they have a board wipe, because you are not gonna nullify every single thing they do.
All right, so while we're talking about 2-mana lords, I'm going to jump ahead here to the Vodalian Hexcatcher. This is the Merfolk Lord,
which is one of the best lords I have ever seen. 2-mana 1/1 flash, Merfolk Wizard, 1 and a blue, so it isn't even double blue. Other Merfolk you control get +1/+1, and you get the ability of sacrificing a Merfolk contra target non-creature spell unless its controller pays 1.
Yeah, so non-creature, non-instant, or sorcery is already insane.
Yeah.
The fact that it's flash means this functions as a sort of counterspell just by itself, even if you don't have to have that many other merfolk around.
As a Jwari Disruption.
Yeah.
And also, really fun synergy. There's this merfolk from, I don't know where the hell it is, which is a 3-mana 2/2. Whenever a spell or an ability controls whenever a spell or an ability controls a spell an opponent controls, you get a 1/1 merfolk token.
Oh, that's interesting.
So it's a 3-mana 2/2 that does that, and it also has the ability of tap 7 merfolks, counter target spell.
Okay, yeah, I remember this card.
So I don't know if that's good, but you also have the
Well, I don't know if it's good, but it's definitely great.
Yeah, exactly. And you also have the 4 Curse Catchers, and you can just really go off countering everything your opponent makes. Like, even if you have to use 2 merfolks to double first spike something, getting 1 back, it's just amazing.
Yeah, so super cool card. This and elves and goblins, right? Those are the 3 sort of original tribes, I think, if you go back all the way to Alpha. Soldiers and Clerics, less so. They came out along later, but especially the blue, green, and red ones. Those have been kind of in the contention for some of the best tribes since the history of Magic. So for the 30th anniversary, it's really cool to see a very powerful Merfolk Lord. You guys talked about the very powerful Goblin Lord last week. And I think you and I like the Elf Lord. Dan thinks it's good, but maybe we think it's great.
And the Merfolk Lord, I think it's sort of amazing. Just because it has Flash. The Flash is that extra bit of TP that makes it a lot better.
Yes. Okay, well, rounding out the 2-drops here, I want to talk about Yotia Declares War. This is a really interesting card to me, and I think some people in the Discord kind of liked it as well. So
people in the Discord were a lot higher than I am on this, calling it Artifact Bone Crusher.
Yeah, that's interesting. So 1 red Enchantment Saga, the first chapter, create an 0/2 colorless Thopter artifact creature token with flying named Ornithopter. So you get to make an Ornithopter, which, as we know, is worth 0 mana. 2 mana, tap any number of untapped artifacts you control. When you do, Yotia Declares War, deals that much damage to target creature or player. Creature or planeswalker. And then the third one is up to 1 target artifact you control becomes a creature with power and toughness 4/4 until end of turn. So in the face of no disruption, you could play an Ornithopter, you could ping a 1-drop, and then on turn 3, or whatever, on the third turn, you could attack with a 4/4 Ornithopter flying.
Yeah. I don't love it as much as people do, but people seem to be really high on it. I think it's especially the fact you have the read ahead plus the second step.
Yeah, I think we don't well, I won't speak for you. I don't yet understand how powerful read ahead is going to be. My sense is the modality of these cards is actually going to be way better than we think. So you could imagine like playing the Epicure on turn 1, your opponent plays Llanowar Elf. Now, if I need to kill it, I can play Yotia Declares War on the second one. Tap my my blood, kill the elf. If not, if they play a tap blue-white land because they're control, I can actually try to get the full value from the Yotia Declares War. So I think this card is actually going to be better than we think, just because it has a ton of text. It's very cheap. I do wish that the second ability let you hit your opponent, but maybe they were worried that would be sort of too combo-y or something. You could just get cheese out of the game. I don't know if you'd ever have that many artifacts, but
the fact I would be so much higher on this, exactly as you guys said, if the second step went face.
But it does not, so we'll have to...
We'll have to make do with our 2-mana semi-Bone Crusher Giant. It's an interesting card, I'm not saying it's bad. I'm just struggling to find it at home.
Yeah, I'm going to play it in red-black improvise for sure, and see if I can...
Going on with the 2-drops, because everything is a 2-drop today.
Yes. Impulse, this is a throwback to... I don't know what set it was in, but it came out when I was young, so you know that was a long time ago. Impulse, 1 in a blue instant. Look at the top 4 cards of your library. Put 1 of them into your hand and the rest on the bottom of your library in any order. Instant. So what do you think about Modern? Modern has maybe just passed us by. It's 2 mana to replace itself, basically. Like a super cycling.
It's the best of its effect, right? We have seen these sort of cards being played everywhere. If I'm not mistaken, Lotus is playing Shimmer of Possibilities, which is like straight up, strictly War's Impulse. It's both a sorcery and only looks at 3. So this can only get better from there.
Yeah, I could certainly imagine this being played in some combo decks and Pioneer. Impulse is better than cards like Opt and Consider Opt and Consider are better if your deck is kind of a bunch of the same stuff and you just kind of want to churn through it. Impulse is better if there's specific cards you're looking for, right? Your 4 ascendancies or something like that. The key cogs in your deck that really make it go. So I could see this definitely making an impact in a few Pioneer combo decks. I don't know if it'll ever get just played on rate. I don't think like blue-black control or blue-white would play a card like this at this point in design. I think the 2 mana is just a little too clunky.
In Modern it is. Also, the flavor text is spot on.
And that counts for something, right?
Yeah. Good flavor text has made me play more cards than it should have.
Yeah, also good art, right? It like kind of sucks you in and you just choose to believe in these cards.
If the more you like a card, because the more times you read a card, the more you like them. And I just get invoked by the flavor text.
All right, we are leaving the land of the 3-drops. We are headed to the land of We're leaving the land of the 2-drops. We are headed to the land of the 3-drops. All right, talk to me about Shauna Purifying Blade. Another legend, of course.
Another legend, because this is Dominaria, and it's now trinket text. We have for Band a 3/3, so a green, a white, and a blue for a legendary creature human warrior with lifelink. At the beginning of your end step, you may pay X life. If you do, draw X cards, where X can be greater than the amount of life you gain this turn. Well of Lost Dreams on a stick, but it has to make it to the end step.
Yeah, this card would have been absolutely insane in like 2001 or something. But,
even later, I think 2015, she would have been great. Like before Fatal Push.
Right. Fatal Push, Strangle. This card just dies so easily. You know, your hope is to maybe like hit it with Collected Company on their end of turn, and then I mean, if you can get a couple cards out of this card is insane. But yeah, I think unfortunately creature removal has told us that, you know, this is the kind of thing that you can't do anymore.
Yeah, I mean, the fact this is both a card you need to hit of Collected Company or such, and then you gotta connect with it or have another way to gain life. I want to love this card, and I can't.
Right. I think this is the classic trap. Like, it invites you, like, you can imagine the times when it doesn't die, and you get to do all this stuff, and, you know, most of the time it is going to die, though, so unfortunately it's not worth doing.
But sadly, it just be one of those beautiful legendaries I might brew once, never draw a single card, and get a 3/2 based on the fact Collected Company can be a good card when it hits the good cards.
Right.
So, going forward, I think you want to talk about a certain Peacekeeper, am I right?
I do. This is Paulo Vito at home. The Paulo Vito she told you. Or...
I don't know if this is Paulo Vito at home, actually. And I want to discuss that, because I'm not sure if the translation is correct.
Okay.
So
this is not in Spanish, so more doesn't get to... Yeah.
So, you want to read it?
Yeah, 2 and a white, human cleric. Again, cleric. Human. Vigilance, 3/3. So 3 mana, 3/3 vigilance is, you know, not terrible. As it enters the battlefield, look at an opponent's hand and choose any card name. So it does not have to be a card from their hand. You can choose any card name. Spells your opponents cast with the chosen name cost 2 more to cast. Activated abilities of sources with the chosen name cost 2 colorless more to activate unless they're mana abilities.
So, okay, I just checked. It's written correctly. This looks at your opponent's hand as it enters the battlefield. This is a meddling mage, not an ETB. Your opponent cannot bolt this in response to a trigger.
Oh, yeah.
And that's huge.
Yes.
Like unlike Pablo Vito Rosa, where your opponent can just like bolt it for 1 mana, you cannot kill this before it looks at your hand. This is
Correct.
And it's not like a trigger, it just gets in the battlefield. And more importantly, your opponent cannot respond to a trigger. If you pile this in, it happens.
Okay. All right. So we're thinking modern then, if we're talking about Other Vial.
I am not particularly, but also Coco, for example. I mean, sort of, but also like Collected Company in Pioneer, for example, or Pyre of Heroes, to be more specific. If your opponent has something they want to activate, they have to do it in response to the activation, because you are not gonna get a trigger of this. This is gonna be a passive effect the moment this enters the battlefield.
Okay, so you're thinking maybe the applications of this are better at times than Elite Spellbinder.
I think Spellbinder was better until I realized this is not a trigger.
Okay, now you're thinking maybe this is a little better.
I think now this might be a little better, because Pablo Vito Rosa has the huge advantage of, even if it dies, your opponent doesn't... It still keeps the tags. But this has the huge advantage that it doesn't die as efficiently. Like, let's say the only removal your opponent's hand is a light, it's, I don't know, a Wizard's Bolt. Making it cost 3, and then not being able to kill it is huge. So...
Okay, I mean, the thing that I don't like about cards like this is they often have to name removal first, because if they don't, then they just cast a cheap removal spell. Whereas Elite Spellbinder, they probably just have to kill it just because it's a 3 mana, 3 power flyer. And so its effect gets left around to, you know, tax the Wrath or tax the Planeswalker or whatever that you really wanted to tax anyway.
I do think this might be better than Spellbinder in Modern as well, just because you can name stuff like Belcher all of a sudden, right?
Yeah. I do like, to your point, like, you vial something in on 3, like, your opponent has to crack their fetch land. If they don't, you just get to get it, maybe?
Yeah, exactly. And that can be extremely annoying, because you can just really out-tempo your opponent with a play like that. Like, your opponent plays a fetch land, and you just go end step, tap in my vial, and you get to first look at their hand, and if they don't have an efficient removal, you name the fetch land, and none of that before the creature actually enters the battlefield.
Yeah, so in paper, just be very clear, right? Make sure your opponent doesn't do anything. You know, there was I forget the gentleman's name, Big Dan, whatever, but he pretended to not understand how Meddling Mage work and then got ultimately suspended. But yeah, exactly like Meddling Mage. As soon as it resolves, your opponent can't do anything anymore.
Or like
they
Magus.
don't get to crack their fetch land. Yeah, exactly. They don't get to...
I like this. And now I like it a lot more now that I read it's an Acid Enders. The information game is worth it a lot. After that, another 3-mana 3/3.
Also a legend.
Also a legend, but this one is really up your alley.
I do like this card. Maria, Scholar of Antiquity. So 1 a red and a green for a 3/3 Elf Artificer. Tap an untapped non-token artifact, very important, non-token. Add a green mana to your mana pool. Tap 2 untapped non-token artifacts you control. Exile the top card of your library you may play at this turn. So this is a card that is, in its mana generating, worse than Urza, which we know is a very powerful card. Basically, it's created the sort of existing blue mono blue or blue X artifact archetype. But this also has the ability to keep looking at the top cards of your library, to keep flipping through them. And if you combine it with a card like Paradox Engine, I'm just as an artifact, where you get to untap all your non-land permanents every time you cast another spell, you could imagine easily tearing through your deck as soon as a Paradox Engine hits play. And I don't know what your win condition would be, but it ought to be pretty trivial at that point.
So, my thing is, do you think you see yourself playing this in the close future?
I don't play Modern, but I would definitely be playing a Teamer artifact deck that just was trying to win with Paradox Engine.
Yeah. I'm 100% going in Pioneer because I really struggle to see, like, Urza's shell in Modern really gets to exploit the tokens a lot of the time. And I think that part is particularly important if you're gonna play Urza. Yeah,
the reason why I would not want to play this in Pioneer is because I don't have an Urza effect. This is so unique, right? The only thing that's close is Galazeth, and that only lets you use the mana to cast instants or sorceries. Whereas this is the only card that lets you tap your artifacts to actually play more artifacts, and you want a super artifact dense deck with Paradox Engine. So could you play this like 1 Paradox Engine and a Karn Wishboard, and then just a bunch of other mana, and then maybe also just be like a kind of a mediocre Karn deck that has like artifact mana ramp to play your Karn? That's the kind of thing you'd have to look into. And that, of course, suffers because one of the best decks in the format is mono green, and they're just playing 4 Karn in their deck. So this is a super powerful card. This is like that 2 mana fairy rogue. Like, I don't know if there's a home for this, but when your opponent plays this, you have to kill it. They've built a deck where this card is going to bring the game to a conclusion in, a turn or 2 if it's left alive.
Yeah, this is one of those cards. It has to die on ETB. The good advantage of this is how much cheaper than Urza it is to actually start playing cards off the top of your deck. Sadly, you have to pay for them, but as long as they cost less than 3, this is actually like a discount on Urza a lot of the time.
Yeah, and if your deck is full of 1 or 0 mana artifacts, like, I mean, you can go a long way through your deck, man.
Because you just keep hitting. I hit a 1-drop, I cast it. Now I tap this 1-drop plus another one, go again. Now I tap 0-drop I get for extra mana, and you start going off. I really like this.
Yeah, like, I wonder if you could play this. You know the Teamer enchantment that lets you play an extra land, and then every time you cast a spell, you draw 2 cards?
Yeah.
So now you have like 2, now I'm using this term loosely, but you kind of got like a rule of 8, where you have 2 cards that kind of let you turbo with a bunch of free artifacts. So like, because that deck often plays a bunch of cheap, like 0 mana artifacts and
Song of Creation,
like Mox Amber and stuff. And so I don't know, that maybe that's a area to explore.
Yeah, I like that. This as a secondary payoff for a way to keep generating mana as you go through your deck.
Yeah.
Okay, that may be actually like a really interesting build. Also, of course, Dan always mentions Honor-Worn Shaku, so we can do crazy stuff. Because who doesn't like Shaku? And this is a commander staple for everybody who wants to play Trini Sphere and Frozen and Winter Orb and be a complete stacks piece.
Howling Mine?
Howling Mine, yeah. I mean, do we have Howling Mine in Pioneer? No, we don't.
No,
right?
you have Howling Mine in Modern. You just do Howling Mine turn 2.
Turn 3.
This turn 3.
And go off. Vroom.
Yeah. All right, so there's something there. Maybe the pieces aren't there, but that card is super powerful, and it might just be waiting for another card to be printed. Maybe all the pieces exist right now. There's a lot of people that will explore that, and we'll have to see what they come up with.
Yes, sir. After that, we have Wraith's Frightful Return, an enchantment saga for 2 and a black with Ruira hair. Beautiful art on this card. So,
yeah, spectacular.
First step, you may sacrifice a creature. If you do, each opponent discards a card. Second step, you return target creature from your graveyard to your hand. Third step, you may sacrifice a non-land, no-token permanent. Sorry, target opponent may sacrifice a non-land, non-token permanent. If they don't, they lose 2 life and you draw a card. That art is insane.
Yeah, so if you don't mind losing the creature, this is like a 3 mana 3-for-1.
Yeah.
That does some damage. It just seems like such a grindy card. I need a little shout out to LAA11. This is a very prominent brewer in our Discord. They've had a bunch of 5-0s with a bunch of different kind of grindy shells. This seems like the kind of card they'd like, that just like, you just imagine casting this, maybe you're getting it back from the graveyard, maybe you're blinking it a few times with your Orion, maybe you're getting your Orion back from your graveyard if it died earlier in the game with the second one. It has all this modality, so there's tons of choices. You can loop this card infinitely with Geothermal Kami. You just get to keep doing like 1 and 2 over and over again.
I was talking a lot with the LA11 a few days ago because we were working on this Mardu / also Viorion decklist. And I think he will love this card. I don't know if for that shell, but it really seems up his alley.
Yeah, like, Dan had this as a skip, I kind of did too, and then I was just like, this is the kind of card I would tend to dismiss. But LA11 has shown that you actually have enough time in the format to do this kind of stuff if you pay the price with the rest of your deck. And then as long as you have like a 3 mana, like 3-for-1, I mean, that's pretty crazy.
It can really go off. And that's really, could be like super powerful.
And again, the read ahead stuff, like if you really needed to, you can just play this as turn 3. Okay, that's not very good, but it triggers Fatal Push if you needed to or something. Like there's just all this crazy modality in these cards, I think. Again,
read ahead.
We don't know. I think it's going to play out better than we think. I think it's going to be very impressive that it kind of like is exactly what you needed each time. And then if what you need is the first chapter, that's amazing because then you get to do these 2 extra chapters almost for free, quote unquote.
It being non-token, so it's actually efficient against decks like Rakdos Sacrifice when they have all their plats and such, is huge.
Yep.
I think that's a huge part of why this might actually be interesting. And we're actually, when we get to a new saga in a following minutes, we're actually going to talk about how amazing it can be when you can just sacrifice saga on command.
Yeah.
So.
All right. Continuing on through the 3s.
We have Ertai's Scorn.
All right, so this is only a Pioneer consideration. Pioneer plays a bunch of 3 mana counter spells, and they all have some slight upside. This is more, I think, of like as a sideboard card, almost like a super negate in my mind. So this is 1 blue, counter target spell, so it's a cancel, that's not very good. But it costs a blue less to cast if an opponent casts 2 or more spells this turn. So, a lot of times what happens is you bring in your like 1 negate and 3 Mystic Disputes or something in your mid-range deck that has blue in it for these counter wars, right? And your opponent does something, you Mystic Dispute, they do whatever back. This is basically like a super negate. It gets to counter anything at the end of that. So I could see, this is a super corner case, but I could see this maybe as just being like your 4th or 5th counter spell in your sideboard. Because when you get into counter wars, this is like much better than negate, and it also is just a straight up hard counter. If your opponent plays, whatever, their 1-of creature, then you at least get to counter it with this.
In a counter war, this is straight up counter spell immediately. Also, at first read, I thought it read more than 2 spells, which made it a lot worse. But the fact you only need 1 previous spell makes this actually quite easy to get your 2 mana mode on.
Okay, so yeah, just a corner case I wanted to highlight. The next card is an actual good blue card, Haughty Djinn. Not that kind of haughty Mord. Not that kind of haughty Mord.
What the frick does haughty mean? Like that kind of haughty.
Haughty, Haught, is like a djinn that's full of itself, that is arrogant and condescending.
Scornfully and condescendingly proud. What a good word.
Yeah, there you go.
So 3 mana star 4, 1 and double blue for a djinn with flying. Power is equal to the number of instant and sorcery cards in your graveyard, so Enigma Drake so far, but instant and sorcery spells you cast cost 1 less.
Yeah, so this is kind of a combination of 2 different creatures that saw play in the same deck, right? We had a 3 mana Drake that was the same power and toughness as this. And then that same deck was playing Goblin Electromancer that was a 2 mana card that made instant and sorcery spells cheaper. So this sort of jams them into one card, makes it mono-colored. I think this card is really good.
I think this is really good. I agree completely. It's a mixture of two effects, and I just had this really bad idea that maybe DC plays in something like, I don't know, Modern Storm as 2 extra copies of Baral/Golden Electromancer that actually can beat down your opponent if needed.
Yeah, so Dan makes a point here, which is we live in the era of Go Blank, so it's not as reliable as a beatdown card. And I think that's right. You don't want to just add this to an existing blue-red shell. I think you need to reimagine that blue-red shell, where it's not playing that many delve cards, and instead Haughty Djinn's power is the only thing that's affected by yeah, exactly.
Or flashback cards. You're actually not
so removing. I'm talking... Exactly. So I'm talking about playing a more controlling list, where we get to play Shredder, Crackling Drake, and this, maybe Sprite Dragon. So now we have all these flying creatures. We can play Winged Words. This is a card people might not be aware exists. 2 colorless and a blue. Draw 2 cards. It costs 1 less if you control a flying creature. This makes it cost 1 blue. So now we have this card where they're attacking our graveyard. We just get to play this on turn 4 and cast 1 blue mana, draw 2. Also, Lofty Denial, super powerful card, right? With this card in play, it is literally like a super mana leak. It's blue mana, counter target spell unless they pay 4 colorless. So now you get the shell of like a very good control shell that goes way over the top of your opponent because you get to play Crackling Drake in the late game. You know, as a 10 power creature that draws a card. Haughty Djinn is just a super mana positive card. You play it on turn 4 with Lofty Denial up, which is functionally a hard counter at that point. Yeah, I just think that, again, we talked about we can make blue-red prowess a different shell. I think now we've got blue-red control, like going way over the top and into the mid and late game and being very resistant to the common plan, right? Oh, I'm just going to bring in my 3 go blanks. It's like, okay, my Haughty Djinn has 0 power. I'm tearing through my deck. Maybe I'm casting Impulse, which is now legal, right?
1 mana Impulse is insane.
So I think you need to reimagine, like, so you get everything that you need out of this card. Maybe it's not a beater. Yeah, okay, your opponent reduces its power to 0. That's like when people would exile your graveyard against your 3 Tarmogoyfs. You're like, all right, I cast 3 more spells on my turn. Do I enter combat?
I love this. The fact you have to deal with this for so many different reasons. Like, even if you control the board, you still have to kill this one. And even if you're trying to, if you have stacks your opponent out of the game with like a rule of silence, like a rule of law, you still have to kill this because it's gonna kill you.
Yep. Yeah, so it kind of attacks from all angles. Like I said, I think you need to reimagine stuff. This isn't a deck that wants to play a bunch of considers, right? You want to make sure you're getting your Goblin Electromancer effect out of it as well.
Yes.
All right, the next card seems like a Mord card, I have to say. Relic of Legends. Tell me about this card.
So we have a 3 mana, add 1 mana of any artifact, which taps to add 1 mana of any color, and has the second ability, tap and untap legendary creature you control, add 1 mana of any color. So, Honorworn Shaku, but fixed, because it doesn't let you tap non-creature permanents, but it just fixes your mana so well. Like, you just start going off with Bard Class, they just bound to win you the game.
Yeah, another card. You are kind of a Kinnan fan, so I could imagine a Kinnan, the 2/1 dwarf that taps to make a treasure. This, that's your shell of 3 cards that just makes an absolutely insane amount of mana.
Also, fun interaction. This doesn't work with Kinnan.
The extra ability doesn't, but the first tap ability does.
It's so weird it doesn't. Like, at the first sight it should, but this doesn't count as tapping a non-land permanent for mana. Because it doesn't have the tap ability.
Right.
That's just crazy.
Yeah, so it's kind of wild. You can play this on turn 3, then on turn 4 you play your 4th land, you play the 2/1 dwarf, you tap it, you make a treasure, you make a mana. You play Kinnan, you can tap this for 2 mana, the treasure for 2 mana, Kinnan for a mana. So that turn you get to play 4 mana worth of legends to the board, and then you actually go up mana over that exchange. You actually can make 6 mana right there.
Yes.
So it's like a crazy ramp spell. I mean, you almost get to activate Kinnan just from that without we were talking about doing nothing on turn 1 and 2.
Just without.
And all that stuff is through removal, right? You get to do all that stuff
in
response to any removal spell. So there's definitely something there. I don't know what it'll be, but
there might be something.
I think we're going to try to find out.
Also, I love the fact it says the flavor text, if the worst parts of history can repeat themselves, it stands to reason the best parts can as well. And this is clearly Collision Relic.
Yeah, right, exactly.
From back in the day, so it's like perfectly set up. So, going forward, the next 3-drop.
All right, Lagomos, Hand of Hatred. 1, a black and a red for another legendary creature. Human Shaman, 1/3. At the beginning of combat on your turn, create a 2/1 red elemental creature token with trample and haste. Sacrifice it at the beginning of the end step. Tap, search your library for a card, put it into your hand, then shuffle. Activate only if 5 or more creatures died this turn. So I think this card is just fine on normal rate. Just a 3-mana 1/3 that makes a 2/1 that attacks with trample and haste. And then next turn attacks for 3 power. Especially because if you're thinking about decks with Torbrand, because we do have the red-black Painland and Pioneer. If you're thinking about decks with Embercleave, the extra body really matters. If you're thinking about decks with Deadly Dispute or Cat Oven or whatever, you're just making an extra piece that you don't mind if it dies. It does trample the 2/1, so it actually just goes over. You know, like they can't sacrifice their cat, let's say, if you're playing the mirror. You're just smashing in for damage every turn. I don't know that you'll ever get to activate the tap ability. I'm not sure that'll ever happen. But I think this card on rate is actually just pretty good, or very close.
Than cards like Squee or Legion Warboss, and that's my biggest problem. Like, unless you're looking like 12 copies of that effect, why not play the better ones? Because you're not.
Well, you're
not ever getting the tap ability.
I don't think this is better than Squee. I agree. I think Squee's very good, but it's better than Legion Warboss. Do not play Legion Warboss. Don't bring that in my house.
Why?
It's got 3 toughness.
Yeah, but
I get to stomp Legion Warboss. Get that out of here.
Yeah, maybe. But this is worse than Squee, so you're actually gonna need like 6 to 8 copies and be playing red. Yeah, I'm black.
Yeah. So it's at least something to keep in mind. I think people just say, "Oh, you're never going to tap it for 5." I agree. So, but maybe you want the 5th Squee, or the legend rule of Squee is haunting you. So you want 3 Squee and 1 of this.
That's the reason to play, because you have like 5 Squees and you're attacking with everything. Opponent has 2 champ fun ones, and eventually, sometime in your life, you actually get to tap it.
Yeah, and if you get to tap it, that's GG's.
Next one, we have one of the best 3-drops we have seen in years, which is Aether Channeler. Might be like the best mana war effect we have ever seen. 2 and a blue for a 3-mana 2/1 creature human wizard. When it enters the battlefield, you have to choose one of 3. Draw a card. Return another target non-land permanent to its owner hand, or create a 1/1 white bird token with flying. This is insane.
Yeah, this card is very good. So we talked about Cal's Blood Mage. I think I was pretty high on it, and it ended up seeing no play, which was disappointing to me. And we briefly talked about this in our group chat today. Damon was a little more skeptical than I was, sort of pointing out, when the graveyard exiling ability of Cal's Blood Mage is good, then that's great. But I just think these abilities are just so much better on average. And the default of being able to bounce a permanent is just so generically useful. I mean, even if you're just like bouncing like Kiora or something, like you just get something out of it that when drawing a card isn't valuable. Against control, it just draws a card, right? So it's always good in every matchup.
And when you need a board, the one with flying is a lot better than the pest. And I think, like, for example, I was playing a lot against Spike's Bansol Herald a few weeks ago, and that deck always lost to the fact they cannot, for the life of themselves, to solve a Planeswalker, right? Because if every card in your deck is a 1/1 or a wall, your opponent resolves a Bright and 6 or a 5-mana Teferi or an Narset, and you're just softly conceding. Getting a 3-mana 2/1 that can just bounce that, it's so much better than whatever they had.
Yeah, so I could imagine you getting to, I've got a little note here, you get to cut some of your removal slots in your like Coco decks or your bounce decks. This is like a card that can be value when you need it to be on an empty board, and then it can be, worse removal, sure. Obviously, there's, Reflector Mage is much better than this card against specifically creatures. But this lets you kind of like cheat on some of those slots where you don't want to play that many of the 1 white 2/2 that can only exile, permanents that are 4 or less because your opponent, plays a 5-drop. Well, this actually helps you here.
Yes. I like it. I love this card. And I think it will see a lot of play in both Pioneer and Modern.
All right, our last 3-drop is Vodalian Mindsinger. 1 blue, Merfolk Wizard, kicker 1 red and or 1 green. It enters the battlefield with 2 +1/+1 counters on it for each time it was kicked. It is a base 2/2. When it enters the battlefield, gain control of target creature with power less than Vodalian Mindsinger's power for as long as you control Mindsinger. Dan points out that it's really interesting with the new 2-mana Lord that you were highlighting. So first of all, the Lord makes it 3 power, so it can take a more powerful creature. And the it gives it the ability to protect it, right? Because your Merfolk now tap to counter the removal spells that in theory would kill your Mindsinger. So I think that's kind of a cool little interaction.
I think my biggest problem with this, so I don't think this will see play in Modern.
No, I don't think so. If Pioneer Wizard, if Pioneer Merfolk exists, this will be a foil.
Exactly, that was gonna be my point. This is also a wizard for some reason.
Yeah, there you go.
So let's just play this in the wizard's deck. Why go with Merfolks?
A little Naban plus this guy?
Yes. Oh.
So wait, Naban also doubles the +1/+1 counters, right?
Let me check.
Because that's a trigger?
Yes. No, I think will it?
Yeah, because
no,
it's
it doesn't get
with.
Exactly.
With. Oh, okay.
It doesn't gain.
But still, if you pay 5 mana for this, you can get two 3 power creatures.
Yes, and that's pretty big.
Yeah, it's just gonna die.
Yeah, the fact it doesn't steal him permanently is what destroys it for me.
Yeah, I mean, we've had a lot of these effects before. There's a 4-mana fairy, right? A 2/2 flying fairy that takes a creature. That doesn't see any play in Modern because it dies to a Stiff Breeze. If you have sack effects, then taking the creature temporarily, is a lot more attractive.
But then why are you playing a Merfolk Wizard double blue in your sacrifice deck?
Well said.
And that gets us tough. So, going into the 4 drops, we have Astor, Bearer of Blades. 2, a white and a red for a 4/4 human warrior. When it enters the battlefield, look at the top 7 cards of your library, that's really deep, for an equipment or vehicle card and put it into your hand. Put the rest on the bottom, shuffle. Put the rest on the bottom in a random order, shuffle them I meant. Equipments you control have equip 1, and vehicles you control have crew 1. So, slam dunk for both Hammer Time and Plowdex in Pioneer.
Yeah, I think so. Dan says probably better than Nahiri Era of Ardence. This seems way better to me. This draws a card immediately. It can crew even in response to removal, so you get to crew with this guy. The turn you play it, if you're crewing up the Plow and they choose to kill this instead, then the Plow gives you 3 of the mana back, so this costs 1 effectively. This card just seems great to me. I've lost to Hammer Time a few times. It's not as far away as you'd think in Pioneer. So I could imagine that being a thing. The Plow deck is maybe a little more attractive because they get to play a lot more equipment. So the draw ability on this is a little more likely to hit. It's almost like a 4-mana 4/4 that draws a card in that shell. The Hammer Time deck is only playing like 6 or 7 actual cards this could hit. So I think both decks want this card. I think a 4-mana 4/4 is not great, but it's not like super. It's not like a hauntingly poor card. Yeah, I think this card is going to see a bunch of play, and I think people that have been experimenting with Hammer Time, because I've seen them in the queues, are going to be playing 3 or 4 of these guys for sure.
Yeah, I agree with that. This, looking at 7 makes it so you don't even have to go that deep in how many copies you're playing of everything. You don't need a critical amount. 7 is so deep that you're not bound to fail.
Yeah.
And with the next 4 drop, another double color 4-mana legendary creature. Also, of course, Astor is legendary. Nael Abisoa Aeronaut.
Yeah, so this card, I don't know if this is playable, but I just want to point out how insane this card is. So it's 2 green and a blue for a 2/4 flying elf scout. Why is it legendary? It can't even be a commander because you don't get to use the cool part of its ability, but fine. Domain. So whenever it does combat damage to a player, look at the top X cards of your library, where X is the number of basic land types among lands you control. All right, fair enough. And then you can put 1 of them on top of your library and the rest on the bottom. But if you have 5 basic land types, you get to draw. So if this hits and you have all 5 types, this is Scry 5 draw, which is a 2.5 mana effect every time it hits you.
It's a bit worse than Scry 5 because you don't get to keep more than 1 on top.
Sure, but whatever. Let's say we're looking for Niv Mizzet or Enigmatic Incarnation or whatever. Really deep. Yeah, it digs really deep and then puts it in your hand. So yeah, if you imagine where you play Sylvan Caryatid, you play this on 3, and then maybe you play the 2-mana green enchantment that makes your land all types, and then hit with this. That's not a crazy start to a game.
Yeah, I agree.
You could do it. You could Growth Spiral into this turn 3, and then play a Triome to complete the quintet.
And a 2/4 is actually quite a decent party.
Yeah. I don't know. If you do that in a deck where you're trying to find Niv Mizzet and then or Bring to Light, and then you just find it, it just seems crazy to me. I don't know if this is worth it. Again, it's fragile. Niv Mizzet has lots of strengths, including all of its ability to Wrath, but That's at least good enough to think about doing. If you got to do this, play this on turn 3, and your opponent doesn't kill it, like the game probably ends if it hits. All right, just want to highlight this next card real quick. Sheoldred's Restoration, 3 and a black sorcery, kicker 2 and a white. Return target creature card from your graveyard to the battlefield. If the spell was kicked, you gain life equal to that card's mana value. So for 7 mana, you get a crazy resurrection. Otherwise, you lose that much life, and then you exile this sorcery as it resolves. So this is the first non-conditional 4-mana sorcery resurrection spell in Pioneer. Whether it's good enough, I mean, the drawback is very real. You can make an Esper deck that's mostly control and is just trying to get a Dream Trawler in play on turn 4. That helps mitigate the life loss. It was unbeatable against Red-Black. If they start adopting Liliana, then your Dream Trawler plan is terrible. But I just wanted to highlight that this is the first time this effect has existed. So is it going to be good enough? Is Dream Trawler even that good in a world where I don't know how good Liliana is going to be? I suspect it's going to be very good. I actually think Red-Black is going to play like 3 of them maybe. So maybe your whole plan is off. But I just wanted to highlight this is the first 4 mana. Just straight up, nothing fancy. You don't need anything else in play.
Yeah.
And that lets you play instant speed discard, which lets you get around most of the hate, right? The Graveyard Trespasser and stuff like that is not good against
works
3 mana.
perfectly with Tainted Indulgence.
Yeah, exactly. All right, on to my favorite 4-drop of the entire set.
I thought it was going to be the other one.
Really?
Yeah, so let's go into Ertai. Tell us about it.
Ertai Resurrected. 2, a blue and a black, legendary creature, of course. Phyrexian Human Wizard, Flash. When it enters the battlefield, choose up to 1, so you don't have to do either. Counter target spell or activated ability or triggered ability, its controller draws a card, or destroy another target creature or planeswalker, its controller draws a card. 3/2. This card seems really good to me. If you imagine Venser, you play a Venser and you bounce a spell from your opponent on the stack. That's like your opponent drew a card. They functionally drew the card that you just countered, right? This does that, and they draw a random card, a card that might be much worse than the card you just countered, right? If the card you countered is a linchpin. Same thing with Venser, like bouncing a permanent. This actually kills it, and so instead of them drawing the card that was in play, and not to mention, this also stops activated abilities and triggered abilities, which could be very useful depending on whatever. It also can target your own things, like you can destroy your own creature that's going to die, right? If you decide to draw a card, you can counter your own bad activated or triggered ability to draw a card. If you have Narset or Notion Thief in play, then it's like an insane Venser where your opponent isn't drawing or you're getting to draw the card.
So the only advantage I see of Venser, which is likely why it's better in Modern specifically, it's bouncing lands. In Venser is huge.
Right, and lands matter a lot more because you have Valakut and you have Tron.
Yeah, and you have Karus. So I think that's why it was replaced. But I'm really excited for this card in Pioneer, for example. Enigmatic Incarnation can really use a way to get rid of 4 and 5 mana permanent, like planeswalkers they couldn't deal with efficiently before, or stuff like that. So I'm really I really actually like this card.
Yeah, I mean, I think this card does fit well in Enigmatic Incarnation, and I think you guys outlined why the White Domain exile spell, I think it really only has one home in Pioneer, which is the Enigmatic Incarnation. So I think that shell is going to be really cool. But I think this is almost a card you can build around. You can build like a blue-black tempo-ish list where this is just your, like, one card answers everything. You know, you can play it with like a more controlling shell. You can play it with like a Narset Notion Thief shell and just a ton of removal. It can kind of do anything and everything if you wanted to. You can play it in like a Sultai shell where you are playing like Growth Spiral and Lotus Field, and then this can actually counter your Lotus Field trigger like in the mid to late game as like a crazy mana ramp. Like this can just do everything.
Yeah, this card is really interesting. I just want to play Demonic Pact and counter the last trigger with it, so I also can just draw a card. Demonic Pact.
Oh yeah, that's insane. You can play it with the new Solkanar.
Yes!
By the way, Classic, you did call me out that I do love that card. Yeah, it's go time. I just reminds me of my youth 95 years ago, as you say. Yeah.
So if you can use that on a trigger of your own, it's amazing. But people think giving your opponent a card for some reason it's worse for you than bouncing the spell back to their hand, which generally it isn't.
Yeah, if you're countering the right spell or killing the right creature, right? You kill a 5-drop from mono green, and your opponent gets to draw a card. And like, yeah, it sucks. It'd be nice if they didn't get to draw a card, but a random card for mono green is worse than the average 5 mana card. Anytime you trade this for a 5 or 6 mana spell, it's so insane.
Even then,
it's
if you
so
trade for a
good.
3-drop or 4-drop, I'm 99% sure in every deck, in every format, a 3-drop/4-drop is better quality and tempo than the statistical draw of that deck.
Yeah.
Like, even if I don't know, something like, even going for like Lily of the Veil, or I don't know, a 4-drop, something like, what's a good 4-drop in? Ezeka's Chariot. Countering an Ezeka's Chariot with this and leaving a 3-2 is a lot better than bouncing an Ezeka's Chariot.
Yeah, and then this is like cost to move. Like 3 power is not nothing. It just kills Karn, right? They play Karn with no blocker. You flash it in, kill their elf, kill their blocker, attack and kill Karn.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And you can even, or counter the -2. If the opponent has no board, play a Karn, you play these. Like,
yeah, this card is really good. I think it has a lot more applications than people are aware of. Solkanar, let's go, Solkanar, come on, all the abilities.
And to the last 4-drop, the Elder Dragon War.
Yes.
Read ahead, 4 mana enchantment saga, 2 and double red. First step, it deals 2 damage to each creature and each opponent, which is actually a good board wipe effect when it's the first part of your deck, of your card. Second step, discard any number of cards, then draw that many cards. So it's like big. So far this is like big pattern of big favor of the Mirror Breaker. And finally, for third step, you create a 4/4 dragon token with flying. So what David talked me into, which I actually really like, is how easily you can line up these read ahead sagas with Brought Back. So something here pretty specific.
So remind people what Brought Back
is double white, so 2 mana instant. You may return 2 permanents that leave the battlefield this turn to the battlefield. So let's say I play the Elder Dragon War on step 2, on turn 4, and I just discard 2 cards. Then on turn 5, it will make a 4/4 and sacrifice itself, and then I play any creature that sacrifices itself, or I actually get another way to sacrifice something. With Brought Back, I can get back the Elder Dragon War, and I can immediately make another 4/4 if that's what I desire, or actually go through all the steps. I think this is a pretty cool card, and the Brought Back synergy alongside other sagas, like even Fable of the Mirror Breaker, which is always dying, the 2/2 never survives, is actually something I'm really excited for.
Yeah, the other thing I was thinking of is, mono red lists have existed with fires, and then they play the 5 mana 6/5 that lets them like discard a number of cards and draw, and it like pays 1 in red to give +1/+0 and haste to all their creatures. Do you know this card?
No.
Of course I don't know it either.
It doesn't ring a specific bell.
But in Fire's lists, it's very common to see it as a finisher. The Cavalier
Flame, Red Cavalier.
So there's a lot of shells, and I know like Aspiring Spike played some, people have tried it out, this was a big deal in Standard, they were playing like Fires with Cavalier, right? So the turn you play Cavalier, you have all this mana up, it gives +1/+0 to all your creatures. It's really good with Fable.
Oh yeah.
Because Fable helps you find fires on turn 4, and then you play this, and then Fable also gives you 2 creatures that this pumps, and then if this gives haste to the Kiki Jiki half, right? So then the Kiki Jiki half can activate. Okay.
Yes.
This card also seems to slot in that kind of list. The turn you play fires, you were lacking good 4s. This is a 4-drop that helps you find your Cavalier for the next turn, because you discard the cards in your hands that either aren't your 5th land or aren't Cavalier. And then on the following turn, it makes a 4/4 that the Cavalier gives haste to. So I think that that's kind of like a nice sweet spot. Like I was playing a list that I really liked that was playing the shell I just described plus Riel, because it benefited from the discard from a bunch of the effects, including the Cavalier and the Fable. This is another card that like you could feasibly play Riel and this on the same turn if you had a Fires of Invention in play and just draw. You just discard your hand and then double your hand size. So yeah, I think it has applications there. I love it with Brought Back. A 4-mana card that can be a sweeper but never needs to be, right, against decks where it doesn't matter. And if your opponent is at 2, it's a great card. So again, I just think this read ahead mechanic, we don't understand how powerful it is. The fact that you can kind of do whatever you want. Like the sweeper doesn't really matter, and when it doesn't matter, you never use it. It's just a card that selects and then is a dragon.
Yeah, and when you need a fast dragon, this is a 4-mana 4/4 dragon with flying, which isn't amazing, but it's not so subpar in the versatility it provides.
All right, excited to muck around with that one, I think.
Yes.
All right, another card I think that is calling out to Brewers. This is Timeless Lotus. We're in the 5-drops now. 5-mana artifact, legendary artifact. It's got to be a legend. Enters the battlefield tapped. Taps for Wooburg. Taps for all 5 colors. Super cool card. So if you play this on 5 and play your 6th land, you untap with 11 mana. Or if you just untap with it, period, you untap with 10.
Yeah, this is... So, I saw this and immediately I thought of World Tree combo, right? I cannot be the only one.
I mean, I didn't think of World Tree combo because I don't give a shit about World Tree combo.
How can you not give a shit about World Tree combo? World Tree combo is insane.
I gotta put all these crappy cards in my deck. What happens when I draw them? Oh, I guess you're playing Urian, so you never see them.
It's 5 cards. It's not that much.
It's a few more than 5. It's 5 to actually execute the kill. You have to make sure that enough are in your deck, right?
Yeah. I actually... No, it's like... I think it's 4 photos and one and another one. It's 5 gods, 4 photos plus 1. It's not that much.
All right, so, I mean, maybe it's a return of that. I think it's just great with Teferi, who slows the sunset. So the turn you play this, even if you don't, I mean, the not draw, right, is turn 2 Sylvan Caryatid, turn 3 Teferi, untap Caryatid plus a land, you leave up counterspell. Next turn, play Timeless Lotus, untap Lotus, land, Sylvan Caryatid. You have 7 mana that turn.
Yeah.
To do whatever you want. Take an extra turn and make 2 birds, cast whatever
Aldous Epiphany
7-drop you like. Yeah. So, yeah, this card is awesome. It is legendary, but I think that there's going to be lots of cool decks that if you're going to try to go over the top of people, this is the kind of way to do it.
Okay.
Again, it can never be broken in Pioneer because your opponent can just play a turn 3 Karn. And then this might as well stay tapped.
I agree. If I'm going to place a card into this, I'm going to cry. But without the combo, I think you need a combo for it.
Just make 10 mana.
Or make 10 mana and win somehow.
Yeah.
The fact it's annoying, it's whatever. Like double Wooburg though. Like you don't have access to triple green, and that's something to take into consideration.
Well, doesn't the World Tree fixes your lands if you have 6 mana?
Yeah, I know. I mean, like, specifically, like, if you're trying to just use the mana for something degenerate, make sure it's, like, correctly split. And with that being said about the beautiful Lotus, let's go to the last card of the sets, at least so far, because there's a few that have not been completely confirmed, but we might talk about them on Monday. Which is a dragon I think you're really into. Wraith Liberated Primeval.
Yeah, so I love the original Wraith from back in the day. So this is a little cheaper. So this is 2, a red, a green, and a white. Wraith is a Naya dragon. For a 5/5 flying, Ward 2. Love the introduction of Ward, by the way, to all these cards. Ward is like the fixed hexproof in the same way that sagas are fixed planeswalkers. It doesn't shut off all interaction. It allows your opponent to still do stuff, which is they have to pay more. That you never get the feel bad where they just get to, like, Swords to Plowshares or Wraith. They pay like 4 mana to kill your 5-drop. That seems fair, right? So the text is the key here, though. At the beginning of your end step, if a creature or planeswalker an opponent controlled was dealt excess damage this turn, create a 4/4 red dragon creature token with flying. So in the best case scenario, you get to play this on turn 5 or 4, I guess, if you're very lucky. And then you get to make another 4/4, and both this and that 4/4 have Ward 2. If you get that trigger, this is by far the best 5 mana.
I love that they gave this card to Kibler, the Kibler Dragon Master Kibler, because this is the card that actually got him into being Kibler as we know him, like Wraith itself, and he got the spoiler.
Yeah, well, he's on point.
But yeah, if you have any way to trigger this, like, I just imagine the dream of turn 4 Chandra Torch of Defiance into turn 5 Wraith and -4 on something.
Yeah, I mean, that's a way to do it. You can play the 3 mana Domri that fights, so Domri can accelerate into Wraith if need be, or if you just play, you already have your 5th mana, then you just play Wraith, fight with your Domri. Right there, you'll get to go do it at the end of turn. The other thing is you don't have to play this before the trigger happens. So you attack your opponent's Kiora with a, a 4/4, and they block with a 1/1 or something. I'm making that up.
Yeah.
Then your opponent's incentivized sometimes to trade off or chump block or whatever. And then, I mean, they don't know you have a Wraith in your hand. They don't know you have a Wraith in your deck. And then after that happens, you just play your Wraith, and your opponent's like, oh, that attack that didn't make sense now does because I get... So
yeah, I didn't realize the card didn't have to be on board, and that makes it a lot more interesting.
Yeah, because especially in the late game, right? You have 6 mana up or something. Like, what does your opponent do? Like, oh, I'm going to play around them playing Rith?
No, that's not bound to. I mean,
yeah. So they're probably going to chump block to save their. For instance, we're just imagining a scenario against blue-white. They have their the 4 mana flash planeswalker in play with a 2/2 samurai, and you attack it with a 4-power creature. Of course, they're going to chump block. I mean, that's just the right play. And then if Rith resolves, you just made another dragon, and they're both resistant to removal, right? So.
Yeah. So the only way they are gonna play around this if it's become so common that you just expect people to play around. Like it's the 4th time in the week your opponent attacking with a 3/3 against your 2/2, and you're like, they have a Wraith. They're gonna get a 4/4. I shouldn't block. I should let Wandering Emperor die.
Also, be very conscious of this. If you have like trample, you need to assign an extra damage to a creature. If you have a 3-power creature you're attacking into 2 2/2s, make sure you assign all 3 to the 2/2, etc. Because like you could imagine, for instance, attacking your chariot into 2 2/2s, and your opponent's like, well, that's not a crazy attack because they got to make a 2/2 cat, and then we're trading, our 2/2s for that, and then they just kill 1 2/2 and play Rith. Like that's a play that I could imagine happening all the time.
Yeah,
and of course, chariot works well with this because copying those dragons is very intriguing, right? So. I just see a lot of stuff happening here. This just seems super sweet to me. Every time it works, like you just win the mid-range matchup. Red-black loses. If you make a second dragon, that game is over. You just extend your right hand. The problem is, I don't think this can be your main plan because it's so bad against Lotus. It's bad against blue-white control, blue-black control, right? Those they don't have any permanents in play. Even if you have all kinds of kill spells in your hand, you don't get anything. So. And a 5-mana 5/5 flying is just not that good anymore somehow.
5-mana 5/5 flying with Ward 2 is not irrelevant.
It's not bad. Again, it's not
yeah,
horrific.
But if you can get the 4/4 at least once, it goes from meh to kind of amazing.
So yeah, even if you do it like, let's just imagine you play this on turn 4 against mono green, right? They're going to ramp ahead of you, but you have a ton of a chance after that to like kill their elf or whatever, like with a stomp. And now you get a 4/4. Like you're going to start gaining this free 4/4 every turn, and that's going to really start to add up.
Yeah.
All right, so that kind of sums it up.
Yeah, sums it up for tonight.
We covered a lot of cards here.
We went through a lot of cards. Likely all the remaining cards, unless 3 or 4 like final spoilers shocks us by Monday. And if they do, we're going to talk about them, and you're going to hear everything that's happening for Dominaria United.
Yeah, so for people who maybe aren't used to what happens here, we'll normally do like a quick wrap-up where we kind of share cards we're excited to brew around, or we'll argue about cards we think we'll see play. Obviously, I think the brew around discussion is a little more interesting because that's kind of what we do here. And then we are going to start brewing with these cards. I think they are available in the 2nd weekend of September, the weekend after Labor Day for Americans. Yeah, there's a lot of cool cards, a lot of exciting cards.
Also releases really soon. I think it releases on MTGO in like 6-7 days.
Oh, really? Okay, so before Labor Day.
Yeah. It's like, I think it's on 1st or 2nd of September it's released on MTGO and Arena.
Oh, maybe they want them out for the long Labor Day weekend.
Would make sense. And everybody, if you hear kitten sounds during the recording, it's because my cat gave birth to 4 tiny kittens that are in a tiny box right by my side, so I can make sure nothing
they
happens to them.
They are super cute.
They're super cute and tiny. So yeah. Thanks so much, David, for joining me today. I have no idea what we're preparing for Monday. Likely, we're getting the top 10 plus the leftovers and our first brew session. And I hope everybody is going to shine us.
All right. Take care, buddy.
Take care, David. Bye-bye, everybody. Bye-bye.
Peace.
If you enjoyed today's episode, remember to tune in on Monday, as our Faithless Brewers look at the few cards that alluded to today's spoilers. A few sagas and a few amazing cards have been found, and maybe these are the keys for our following brews. Please also remember, if you enjoyed, you can support us via Patreon, which will grant you immediate access to our Discord with our Faithless Brewers and an army of mind-like players. Finally, I hope you have enjoyed the show and have a nice night. See you on Monday.